The autumn rain drummed against the cracked windows of the Riverside Diner as Maya Rodriguez counted the crumpled bills for the fourth time. $167. The envelope from the insurance company sat beside her coffee cup, its contents as final as death itself. Coverage denied. Pre-existing condition exclusion. Her 8-year-old daughter Sofia shifted in the vinyl booth, trying to reach the crayons scattered across the chipped Formica table. The foreport in her small arm caught the fluorescent light, a reminder of the ongoing battle against acute lymphoblastic leukemia that had consumed their lives for the past 2 years. "Mama, can we color the Princess Castle now?" Sofia asked, her voice thin but hopeful. Maya forced a smile, pushing the bills aside. "Of course, Mia," but her mind raced with impossible calculations. The next round of treatment would cost $43,000. The experimental therapy Sofia's oncologist recommended, the one that could save her life, required $60,000 up front. Maya had already sold everything: her mother's engagement ring, the car she'd worked 3 jobs to buy, even her collection of culinary school textbooks from dreams long abandoned. The diner's bell chimed as the lunch rush began. Maya glanced at her phone. 11:47 a.m. She needed to pick up a double shift at the hotel after Sofia's afternoon treatment, then work the overnight cleaning crew at the office complex. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford, but losing Sofia wasn't an option she'd accept. "Mrs. Rodriguez." Dr. Patterson's voice came through her phone. Maya stepped outside into the drizzle, leaving Sofia with the familiar coloring books. "The insurance appeal was denied again," she said before he could speak. "I know, Maya. We need to schedule Sofia's next phase soon. Without it," his pause carried the weight of unspoken endings. "How long do we have?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the rain soak through her thin jacket. Around her, the small town of Millbrook carried on its daily rhythm, oblivious to the desperation clawing at her chest. This place had been home for 3 generations of her family, but now it felt like a trap. That's when she saw the courthouse notice taped to the lamppost. Property auction, October 12, 2025. Foreclosed properties. Starting bids as low as $500. Something stirred in Maya's chest. Not hope exactly, but a flicker of possibility. 2 days later, Maya sat in the back row of the courthouse auction room. Sofia beside her in her wheelchair, an ivy pole draped with princess stickers. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the half-empty space, mostly filled with real estate investors and contractors looking for quick flips. Next item: the old Kellerman estate on Maple Hill Road. Victorian mansion, built 1892, 43 rooms on 12 acres. The auctioneer paused, consulting his notes. Property has been vacant for 22 years. Significant structural concerns. City has condemned the east wing. Starting bid, $3,000. Maya's heart sank. Even with her savings and the small loan from her sister, she had exactly $2,847. Silence stretched through the room. The locals knew the Kellerman place. Everyone in Millbrook had stories about the eccentric German art professor who'd lived there alone for decades before disappearing in 2003. Rumors swirled about why Herman Kellerman had sealed off entire sections of the house, why he'd never allowed visitors, why he'd left everything behind when he vanished. Anyone. $3,000 for the Kellerman estate. Maya watched potential bidders shake their heads. The mansion was a money pit, they whispered. Asbestos, lead paint, foundation issues. A couple of investors had walked through it years ago and emerged, shaking their heads. $2,500. The auctioneer tried. Maya's hand trembled as she raised it. Every eye in the room turned toward her. "We have Do I hear Nothing. Going once, twice, The gavel came down. Sold to the young lady in the back for $2,500. The paperwork took 3 hours. Maya signed deed transfers and liability waivers, while Sofia dozed in her wheelchair. The courthouse clerk, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, kept glancing at them with concern. "Honey, you know that place has been empty for over 20 years, she said quietly. "The roof leaks something fierce, and the city's been trying to demolish it for a decade. We need somewhere to live," Maya said simply. "This is what I can afford." Mrs. Chen stamped the final document. "The keys are with Patterson Hardware. Old Mr. Patterson has been checking on it monthly for the estate lawyer. You sure about this?" Maya looked down at Sofia, who stirred awake and smiled up at her with complete trust. "I'm sure." The drive up Maple Hill Road wound through overgrown oak trees that hadn't been trimmed in decades. Maya gripped the steering wheel of her sister's borrowed pickup truck. Sofia buckled in beside her. As they approached what would be their new home, the Kellerman estate emerged through the trees like something from a Gothic novel. The Victorian mansion rose 3 full stories, with a 4th floor visible in the tower that crowned its eastern corner. Paint peeled from its weathered clapboard siding in long, dark strips. Shutters hung at odd angles, and several windows were boarded up. But the bones were good. The foundation looked solid. The roofline was intact despite missing shingles, and the wraparound porch, though sagging, still held its ornate gingerbread trim. "It looks like a haunted house," Mama Sofia whispered, but her tone held wonder rather than fear. "It just needs love, Mia. Same as anything." Maya helped Sofia from the truck and into her wheelchair, pushing it carefully through the overgrown gravel drive. The front door key, massive and ornate, turned easily in the original brass lock. The door swung open with a groan that echoed through empty rooms. Dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light, streaming through cracked windows. Despite 2 decades of abandonment, the interior held traces of former grandeur: carved wooden banisters, marble-mantled fireplaces, and built-in bookcases with leaded glass doors. The electricity still worked, though half the outlets had been painted over. Maya had confirmed with the power company that service continued under the estate's account. Apparently, Herman Kellerman had prepaid decades in advance, one of many odd financial arrangements the probate lawyer had discovered. "We'll camp in the morning room tonight," Maya decided, pushing Sofia's wheelchair toward a sun-filled space with relatively intact wallpaper. "Tomorrow, we start making this place home." That first night, they slept on air mattresses surrounded by boxes of medical equipment. Maya lay awake, listening to Sofia's steady breathing and the house settling around them. Creaks and sighs that spoke of age and neglect, but also of shelter. For the first time in months, they had a roof overhead that belonged to them. The next morning brought revelation and challenge in equal measure. Maya discovered running water in the kitchen and one working bathroom on the first floor. But she also found rooms where floorboards had rotted through, windows so warped they couldn't close, and a heating system that appeared to be from the Coolidge administration. "Mama, look," Sofia called from the front parlor. She'd wheeled herself to a tall window and discovered it overlooked formal gardens that, despite decades of neglect, still showed traces of elaborate design. Maya joined her daughter, both of them gazing out at rose bushes grown wild and boxwood, hedges that had lost their geometric precision but retained their beauty. "Herman Kellerman must have loved beautiful things," Maya murmured. They spent the morning exploring the ground floor, Maya taking notes on what needed immediate attention and what could wait. The magnitude of restoration required was overwhelming, but she'd learned to tackle impossible challenges, one small step at a time. It was while investigating a persistent leak in the butler's pantry that Maya first noticed something odd about the house's layout. According to the architectural survey included in the auction papers, the mansion contained 43 rooms across 4 floors, but as she walked the ground level, creating a mental map, she kept losing count. The rooms didn't quite add up to the space the exterior walls should contain. That evening, while Sofia worked on homework at the kitchen table, the only piece of furniture they'd been able to afford, Maya spread the house's original blueprints beside her laptop. The drawings, dated 1892 with modifications added in 1923, 1941, and 1952, showed a logical progression of additions and renovations, but something nagged at her. The modifications from 1952 were extensive. Entire rooms reconfigured, new walls added, old passages sealed. Most curious was a notation in German script that Maya couldn't read, added in what appeared to be Herman Kellerman's handwriting. "Für die Sicherheit der Sammlung, Mama." "I'm tired," Sofia said, setting down her pencil. Maya closed the blueprints and helped her daughter prepare for bed, but the puzzle stayed with her. That night, after Sofia was asleep, she walked the ground floor again with a flashlight, this time paying attention to the architecture itself. That's when she found it. In what had once been a servant's corridor between the kitchen and main dining room, Maya discovered a section of wall that didn't match the others. The wood paneling was newer, the paint slightly different, and when she pressed against it, it gave slightly, as if something hollow lay behind it. She found the concealed latch by accident, running her fingers along the crown molding while trying to determine how the panel had been constructed. A section of decorative wood shifted under pressure, and with a soft click, a narrow door swung inward. Beyond lay a corridor Maya had never seen before, despite her exploration of the house. It stretched into darkness, clearly running parallel to the main hallway, but hidden behind what she'd assumed were exterior walls. Maya's heart hammered as she played the flashlight beam down the hidden passage. The air was different here, staler, untouched by the drafts that plagued the rest of the house. And at the far end, perhaps 30 feet away, she could see another door. This one was steel, painted to look like wood, with a lock that appeared far more modern than anything else in the Victorian mansion. Maya stood at the threshold of the hidden corridor for a long time, her mind racing. Herman Kellerman had lived in this house for over 50 years. He'd been an art history professor at the nearby college. She'd learned from Mrs. Chen at the courthouse. Wealthy, reclusive, and according to local gossip, paranoid about break-ins, despite living in one of the safest towns in Pennsylvania. Why would an art professor need hidden rooms in his house? Maya glanced back toward the kitchen where Sofia slept peacefully in her medical bed. Whatever lay behind that steel door had waited 22 years. It could wait until morning, but as she sealed the hidden panel and made her way upstairs to her air mattress in the master bedroom, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled onto something significant, something that might change everything about their desperate situation. Outside, October wind rattled the loose shutters, and the old house settled into its nighttime rhythms. Tomorrow would bring another round of medical appointments, more phone calls to insurance companies, and the relentless pressure of Sofia's treatment schedule. But tonight, for the first time since the diagnosis, Maya fell asleep with something that felt dangerously like hope stirring in her chest. The morning brought cold, rain, and a leak in the roof directly over Sofia's bed. Maya woke to find herself moving her daughter's medical equipment away from dripping water, setting up a complex arrangement of buckets and tarps, while Sofia watched with the patient understanding of a child who'd learned that life rarely went according to plan. "The ceiling looks angry," Mama Sofia observed as Maya duct-taped a plastic sheet to direct the drip away from the four-pole. "Just grumpy. We'll make friends with it soon." But Maya's mind wasn't on the immediate crisis. All night, she'd dreamed of hidden corridors and steel doors, of mysteries waiting to be solved. As soon as Sofia was settled with breakfast and her morning medications, Maya found herself back in the servants' corridor, staring at the concealed panel dot in daylight streaming through the kitchen window. Her midnight discovery seemed both less magical and more real. The hidden latch operated smoothly, confirming that someone had maintained it, even while abandoning the rest of the house. The passage beyond was narrow but well constructed, with electric lights that still functioned when Maya flipped a switch she hadn't noticed in the darkness. The steel door at the end bore 3 separate locks, a traditional key mechanism, a combination lock, and what appeared to be a more modern deadbolt. But wedged behind a loose section of baseboard, Maya found what Herman Kellerman had left for whoever discovered his secret. A manila envelope containing keys and a slip of paper with numbers written in the same German script she'd seen on the blueprints. Maya's hands shook as she worked the locks. The first key turned easily. The combination 041823 opened the second mechanism. The deadbolt required more effort, its modern mechanism stiff from disuse, but eventually it gave way with a satisfying click. The steel door opened onto darkness that smelled of old wood, preservation chemicals, and something else Maya couldn't identify, a dry, almost medicinal scent that reminded her oddly of the museum she'd visited on a school field trip decades ago. Maya's flashlight beam revealed a space far larger than the corridor should have contained. As she stepped inside, motion sensors activated a series of lights that illuminated what could only be described as a vault. The room extended back under what should have been the mansion's main staircase, a space perhaps 30 feet long and 20 feet wide, with a vaulted ceiling that had been carefully insulated and sealed. Along the walls, Maya could see the reason for Herman Kellerman's paranoid security measures. Paintings hung in precise rows, each mounted in its own climate-controlled frame with small lights that cast perfect illumination across the canvases. Maya moved closer to the nearest work, a landscape that seemed to glow with an inner light. The small placard beneath it bore information in English and German. Landschaft MIT, Bauen, Max Liebermann, 1923. Maya had never heard of Max Liebermann, but even to her untrained eye, the painting was clearly the work of a master. The brushwork was confident, the colors rich despite obvious age, and the composition drew her eye in a way that made her forget her surroundings. She moved to the next painting, then the next, Each bore similar placards with names that meant nothing to her, but spoke of serious art: Otto Dix, George Gross, Vosseli, Kandinsky. Some were small, intimate works that might have hung in a family home. Others were larger, more dramatic pieces that seemed to demand the museum setting Herman Kellerman had created. For them, it was the documentation that began to tell the real story. In the center of the room sat a mahogany desk with a brass reading lamp. Maya found it covered with folders, each meticulously organized and labeled. The first folder she opened contained photographs, insurance valuations, and what appeared to be academic papers about specific artists. But it was the second folder that made Maya's legs go weak. Enter Tiet Kunst, degenerate, art confiscated by Nazi regime. Maya sank into the desk chair, her hands trembling as she opened the folder. Inside were photocopied documents in German, English translations clipped to each page, and photographs showing the same paintings that now hung around her. But these photos were different, black and white, clearly decades old, showing the works hanging in what appeared to be German homes and museums. Their translation of the first document made Maya's blood run cold. Property confiscated from the residence of David and Rachel Weiss, Frankfurt, October 1938. Items catalogued for Führer Museum Linz project. Current location, Storage Facility 7, Munich, the Weiss family. Maya flipped through more documents, each telling a similar story. The Rosenberg collection from Berlin, the Goldman family's modern art from Hamburg. Piece after piece, acquired through force, theft, and the systematic destruction of Jewish cultural life in Nazi Germany. Maya found herself reading about families torn apart, collections built over generations seized in single nights, and artworks that had vanished into the Nazi machinery of cultural appropriation. According to the documentation Herman Kellerman had compiled, these paintings had been part of the vast hoard of degenerate art the Nazis had stolen from Jewish collectors and German museums. But how had they ended up in a Victorian mansion in rural Pennsylvania? The answer lay in the final folder, marked Personal History, H. Kellerman. Maya opened it to find an autobiography written in Herman's careful handwriting. The story it told transformed everything she thought. She knew about the eccentric professor who'd once owned her house. Herman Kellerman hadn't been born Herman Kellerman at all. His original name was Heinrich Klein, and in 1943, he'd been a young German soldier assigned to a unit tasked with cataloging and transporting confiscated artworks. His job was to create inventories, photograph pieces, and prepare them for shipment to storage facilities or to Hitler's plan for a museum. But Heinrich Klein had been raised by parents who'd instilled in him a love of art and culture that transcended politics. When he saw masterpieces being treated as enemy propaganda, when he witnessed the systematic destruction of Jewish cultural heritage, something in him rebelled. Maya read with growing amazement as Herman described his carefully planned theft. Working alone during night shifts at a storage facility outside Munich, he'd gradually removed nearly 24 paintings from their official catalogues, replacing them with works of lesser value or creating paperwork that showed them destroyed or lost in bombing raids. It had taken him 2 years to move the stolen art through a network of sympathetic contacts, eventually shipping the pieces to America through a Catholic relief organization that was secretly helping Jewish refugees. Herman himself had fled Germany in early 1945, using forged papers that identified him as Herman Kellerman, a German-American returning to his family's Pennsylvania farm. He'd bought the Millbrook mansion with money earned from selling a few lesser works, always too private. Collectors who asked no questions, and had spent the next 58 years creating the perfect hiding place for his stolen treasure. The climate-controlled vault, the hidden passages, the elaborate security measures, all designed to preserve these paintings, until he could find a way to return them to their rightful owners. But Herman Kellerman had been a coward, his autobiography confessed. Year after year, he'd told himself he would make contact with survivor organizations, that he would research the families who'd lost these treasures. Instead, he'd lived as a hermit, paralyzed by the fear of prosecution and the magnitude of his crime. The autobiography's final entry was dated December 15, 2002. I am dying, and I have failed in my duty to these works and to the families who lost them. I pray that whoever finds this collection will have the courage I lacked. Every piece is documented. The families can be traced through the Holocaust Museum in Washington or the databases. maintained by the Commission for Looted Art in Europe. Let someone braver than I make this right. Maya set down the autobiography with shaking hands. Around her, 24 masterpieces hung in their climate-controlled cases, each representing not just artistic achievement, but human tragedy and loss. According to Herman's careful documentation, the collection's current value was estimated at over $200 million. $200 million. $200 million. The number echoed in Maya's mind as she studied the paintings with new eyes. Any one of these works, sold quietly through private channels, would pay for Sofia's treatment 10 times over. They could move to a major city with the best children's hospitals, hire the top specialists, try experimental therapies that insurance companies dismissed as too expensive. Could save Sofia's life and live comfortably forever. All Maya had to do was keep Herman Kellerman's secret and sell what wasn't rightfully his to begin with. Maya walked slowly through the vault, studying each painting while her mind raced with possibilities and moral implications. A landscape by Max Liebermann that had once hung in the Weiss family's Frankfurt home. An abstract composition by Wassily Kandinsky that had belonged to the Rosenbergs in Berlin. A striking portrait by Otto Dix that had been seized from the Goldman collection in Hamburg. Each work had a story, a family history that had been brutally interrupted by the Nazi regime. But that was history. Maya's daughter was dying now, today, and these paintings could save her. Maya found herself thinking of Sofia, working on homework at the kitchen table with an IV line running into her thin arm, of the experimental treatment that could give her a normal childhood, a future. Of all the dreams Maya had abandoned to fight this disease, culinary school, her own restaurant, a life that included more than just medical appointments and insurance denials. She thought of the families who'd lost these paintings 70 years ago. Many of the original owners were long dead. Their children might be elderly now, their grandchildren living lives that had never included these masterpieces. Would returning the art really change their lives, the way keeping it would change Sofia? Maya spent 3 hours in the vault that first day, reading Herman's documentation and wrestling with the impossible choice he'd left her. As the afternoon faded toward evening, she finally locked the steel door and made her way back to the kitchen, where Sofia was finishing a snack before her evening medications. "You look different," Mama Sofia observed with the perceptiveness that illness had taught her. "Did you find something good?" Maya knelt beside her daughter's wheelchair, smoothing the thin hair that chemotherapy had left behind. "Maybe, Mija, I'm still figuring it out." That night, Maya lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling while Sofia slept peacefully beside her. Outside, October wind rattled the loose shutters, and the old house creaked with its familiar nighttime symphony. But Maya's mind was in the hidden vault, calculating numbers and wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. $200 million. Sofia's life. Justice for families who'd suffered unimaginable losses. The choice that would define not just their future, but the kind of person Maya would prove herself to be when everything was on the line. Act 2. The discovery. Maya waited 3 days before returning to the vault. 3 days of normal routines, Sofia's medical appointments, phone calls with insurance companies, and the daily challenge of making the old house livable on almost no budget. But the hidden room called to her constantly, its secret weight pressing on her thoughts during every quiet moment. On Thursday morning, while Sofia worked with her homebound tutor in the morning room, Maya found herself standing once again before the concealed panel in the servants' corridor. Her hands moved automatically through the process of opening the hidden door, working the 3 locks, and stepping into Herman Kellermann's carefully preserved vault. This time, she came prepared with her laptop and a legal pad. Determined to understand the full scope of what she'd inherited, Maya began with the documentation, photographing each folder's contents and creating a digital inventory. Herman had been meticulous in his record-keeping. Every painting was accompanied by multiple photographs, provenance research, insurance valuations, and historical context. The files revealed a collection far more significant than Maya had initially realized. The Max Liebermann landscape, according to Herman's research, had been featured in a 1925 exhibition at the Berlin National Gallery before being confiscated from the Weiss family home 13 years later. It was currently listed as missing, presumed destroyed by the German government's restitution office. The Kandinsky abstract, a work from the artist's Bauhaus period, had belonged to Dr. Samuel Rosenberg, a prominent Berlin physician and art collector. The Nazi regime had forced Dr. Rosenberg to sell his collection. at a fraction of its value before deporting him and his family to their concentration camp in 1943, found herself reading these histories with growing emotional weight. These weren't just valuable objects, they were pieces of lives that had been deliberately destroyed, family legacies that had vanished into the Nazi machinery of cultural appropriation and genocide. But it was the research Hermann had conducted in his later years that proved most troubling for Maya's conscience. Using resources available through his position at the college, he'd traced the surviving family members of the original owners. The Weiss family had descendants living in New York and Tel Aviv. Dr. Rosenberg's daughter had survived the war and immigrated to Chicago, where she'd raised a family and become a prominent physician herself. Many of the families were traceable. Their losses were documented. Their legal rights to these works, under international law governing Nazi-looted art, were clear. Maya closed the files and studied the paintings themselves, trying to see them both as artistic objects and as symbols of human suffering and resilience. The Lieberman landscape drew her eye. Repeatedly, its peaceful rural scene seemed to radiate the kind of tranquility that had been stolen from its owners, along with the canvas itself. Her laptop chimed with a reminder. Sofia's afternoon treatment appointment. Maya locked the vault and returned to the kitchen, where her daughter was finishing lunch with the patient concentration that characterized everything Sofia did now. The leukemia had taught her that nothing could be taken for granted, that every meal and every moment required attention and gratitude. Ready to go, Mia? Can we drive past the pretty houses on Elm Street? Sofia asked as Maya helped her into the pickup truck. It had become their routine, finding small, beautiful things to notice on the way to treatments that neither of them wanted to discuss. At Millbrook Regional Medical Center, Maya sat in the familiar pediatric oncology waiting room while Sofia received her weekly chemotherapy infusion. Dr. Patterson emerged from the treatment room after an hour, his expression neutral but serious. "How's she doing?" Maya asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The current protocol is keeping things stable, but we're not seeing the improvement we hoped for." "Maya, we really need to discuss the experimental treatment I mentioned." Maya felt the familiar knot form in her stomach, the one that costs $60,000 up front. CAR T-cell therapy. We'd modify Sofia's own immune cells to fight the cancer more effectively. The success rates for pediatric ALL are remarkable. Over 80% achieve complete remission, and without it, Dr. Patterson's pause spoke volumes. Standard protocol gives us maybe 6 more months of stability. After that, he didn't need to finish. Maya nodded, her throat too tight for words. 6 months? Sofia had 6 months unless Maya could find $60,000 that didn't exist. That evening, after Sofia was asleep, Maya found herself back in Hermann's vault. But this time she wasn't reading documentation or studying paintings. She was researching their current market value. According to the art auction websites Maya consulted, Max Lieberman landscapes were selling for $8 to $12 million, depending on size and condition. The Kandinsky abstract, given its provenance and rarity, might bring 15 to 20 million. The Otto Dix portrait, stark and powerful in its wartime imagery, could command similar prices. Any single painting would solve their immediate crisis. 2 or 3 pieces, sold discreetly through private dealers who asked minimal questions, would secure Sofia's future and allow them to build the life Maya had always dreamed of for her daughter. Maya spent hours that night building spreadsheets and researching private art sales. She learned about offshore auction houses that specialized in works with uncertain provenance. She found contact information for dealers who served wealthy collectors more interested in owning masterpieces than in verifying their legal status. It would be easier than Maya had expected. The next morning brought an envelope from the insurance company, another denial. This one for a different experimental treatment Dr. Patterson had requested. Maya read the letter twice, her anger building with each paragraph of bureaucratic language designed to justify their refusal to save a child's life. She was still holding the letter when her phone rang. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Ellen Hartley from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia." Dr. Patterson referred Sofia's case to our CAR-T program. "I'm calling to discuss timing and logistics." Maya's heart leaped. "Insurance approval?" "Unfortunately, no. But we have a research grant that might cover partial costs. It would reduce your out-of-pocket expense to about $30,000. $30,000 instead of 60. Still impossible, but less impossible. After the call, Maya sat in the kitchen staring at the insurance denial letter, While Sofia worked quietly on a watercolor painting at the table, her daughter had taken up art during the long hours of treatment, creating delicate pictures of flowers and castles that she gave to nurses and doctors who'd shown kindness along their journey. "Mama, look," Sofia said, holding up her latest creation. "It's our house, but pretty." Maya studied the painting. Sofia had imagined the Kellerman mansion as it might have been in its prime. Fresh paint gleaming, gardens in bloom, windows bright with welcoming light. It was a vision of what the house could become with love and resources. "It's beautiful, Mia. You have a real gift. Maybe when I grow up, I can be an artist. I could paint pictures that make people happy. When I grow up." The casual confidence in those words broke Maya's heart and strengthened her resolve simultaneously. That afternoon, while Sofia napped, Maya made 2 phone calls. The first was to a private art dealer in New York, whose name she'd found on a forum for collectors of problematic works. The second was to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. The art dealer, Marcus Webb, listened to her carefully vague description of inherited European paintings from the 1920s and 1930s with obvious interest. "I'd need to see them personally." "Of course," he said in an accent that might have been British or might have been cultivated. "But if they're authentic pieces from that period, and if you can provide reasonable documentation of ownership, I represent several collectors who might be quite interested." "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "For the right pieces, I could have offers within a week. Discreet transactions, naturally. My clients value their privacy." The conversation with the Holocaust Memorial Museum proved more complicated. Maya reached Dr. Sarah Goldstein, who directed their art recovery project. "We receive many calls about potential restitution cases," Dr. Goldstein explained. "If you've genuinely discovered Nazi-looted art, we'd want to authenticate both the works and their provenance history. The process typically takes several months, sometimes years. And then what happens to the pieces? We work with international authorities to return them to the rightful owners or their heirs. It's complicated legal territory, but the moral imperative is clear. These works belong with their original families or in museums where they can be properly honored." Maya thanked Dr. Goldstein and hung up, her hands trembling slightly. The choice was crystallizing into stark terms. Sofia's life versus justice for families who'd suffered unimaginable losses decades ago. That evening, Maya sat in Herman's vault, surrounded by the paintings, while Sofia slept upstairs. She'd brought her laptop and created 2 different spreadsheets. The first calculated how much money she could raise by selling pieces from the collection privately, enough to save Sofia and secure their future. The second listed contact information for the known descendants of the original owners. Maya found herself studying individual faces in the portraits, wondering about the people who'd once owned them. A stern businessman in the Otto Dix painting might have been Dr. Rosenberg himself. A woman in a Lieberman study could have been Mrs. Weiss, posed in her Frankfurt home before the world went insane. These paintings represented the cultural life that the Nazis had tried to destroy, but they also represented Sofia's chance at a cultural life of her own, the opportunity to grow up, to create art, to become the person her illness was threatening to prevent. Maya thought about Herman Kellerman, who'd spent nearly 60 years paralyzed by this same choice between personal benefit and moral obligation. He'd lived as a hermit, unable to enjoy his stolen treasure, but equally unable to return it to its rightful owners. In the end, he'd chosen neither option, dying with the secret intact and the problem unresolved. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled to Marcus Webb's contact information. One call would start the process that would save Sofia's life. The art dealer had connections to collectors who would pay premium prices and ask no questions about provenance. The sales would be untraceable. The money transferred through offshore accounts that left no paper trail. Herman Kellerman had been a coward, but Maya could be brave enough to save her daughter. She dialed Webb's number and let it ring twice before hanging up. Maya spent another hour in the vault, reading Herman's research about the families who'd lost these paintings. Dr. Rosenberg's daughter, Rebecca Rosenberg-Chen, was now 82 years old and living in Chicago. According to Herman's notes, she'd become a prominent pediatric oncologist, dedicating her career to treating children with cancer. The parallel wasn't lost on Maya. Dr. Rosenberg-Chen had saved countless children's lives using the profession she'd inherited from her father. Now Maya had the opportunity to return what the Nazis had stolen from that same father, or to use it to save her own child's life. Maya closed the laptop and sat in the silence of the vault, surrounded by masterpieces that had witnessed the worst of human nature and survived to tell their stories. Tomorrow she would have to choose between justice and desperation, between moral obligation and maternal love. But tonight, she simply sat with the weight of Herman Kellerman's legacy and the impossible choice he'd bequeathed to her daughter outside. October wind rattled the mansion's loose shutters, and Maya's daughter slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming perhaps of the bright future that hung in the balance between right and wrong, between the past's claims and the present's needs. The paintings watched her with painted eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little, and Maya Rodriguez, desperate mother and inadvertent guardian of stolen treasures, faced the decision that would define both her daughter's life and her own soul. Act 3. The moral crossroads. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay on her air mattress listening to Sofia's steady breathing and the house settling around them, her mind cycling through possibilities and calculations that never seemed to resolve into acceptable answers. By dawn, she'd made a decision that felt both inevitable and impossible. She would contact the family's not to return the paintings. Immediately, she couldn't do that while Sofia's life hung in the balance. But she would reach out, learn about these people whose heritage had been stolen, and understand what returning their family's art might mean to them. Maya told herself she was gathering information, but she knew she was really testing her conscience against the weight of her daughter's mortality. The first call Maya made was to Dr. Rebecca Rosenbergchen in Chicago. According to Herman's research, Dr. Rosenbergchen was the daughter of Samuel Rosenberg, the Berlin physician whose Kandinsky abstract was among the collection's most valuable pieces. Maya rehearsed the conversation multiple times before dialing, trying to find words that would explain her situation without revealing too much. When a crisp, elderly voice answered on the third ring, Maya's careful script immediately abandoned her. Dr. Rosenberg, my name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm calling about something that belonged to your father. A long pause. My father died in Theresienstadt in 1943. What could you possibly know about him? Maya took a deep breath. I found something. A painting. It has your family name in the documentation, and I think it was taken from you during the war. Another pause, longer this time. When Dr. Rosenbergchen spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, more vulnerable. What kind of painting? An abstract work by Vasily Kandinsky. According to the records I have, it hung in your father's study in Berlin. Maya heard what sounded like a sharp intake of breath. The blue and yellow composition, with the geometric shapes that looked like musical notes. Yes, Maya whispered. That sounds right. I was 12 when they took it. The Gestapo came to our house in October 1938, after they said my father's collection contained degenerate art that was corrupting German culture. Dr. Rosenbergchen's voice grew stronger as she continued. They catalogued everything, then loaded it into trucks. I stood at my bedroom window watching them take away pieces I'd grown up with. Maya closed her eyes, imagining a 12-year-old girl watching her world disappear into Nazi trucks. I'm so sorry. Where did you find it? Maya hesitated. It's complicated. The painting has been hidden for a very long time. The person who had it, he left documentation about where it came from and who it belongs to, and you're calling to return it to me. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt the weight of Sofia's illness, the urgency of her decision about experimental treatment, the impossible choice between her daughter's life and this stranger's heritage. I want to do the right thing, Maya said carefully, but I need to understand what that means. Dr. Rosenbergchen was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Rodriguez, may I ask what your interest is in this painting? Are you an art dealer, a researcher? I'm a mother, Maya said, the words coming from some deep place of honesty she hadn't expected to access. I have a sick daughter, and I'm trying to figure out how to save her life. Another pause. I see. And this painting is worth enough to help with that. According to the research I've done, yes. But I needed to talk to you first, to understand what losing it meant to your family. Maya heard Dr. Rosenbergchen sigh. Ms. Rodriguez, I spent my entire career as a pediatric oncologist. I treated children with leukemia and other cancers for 43 years before I retired. I understand what you're facing as a mother. Maya felt tears she hadn't expected. Then you know why this is so hard. I do. And I also know that my father spent his final years in a concentration camp, dying slowly of typhus, while wondering what had happened to the cultural legacy he'd spent his life building. Dr. Rosenbergchen's voice was gentle but firm. That painting represented more than money to him. It represented the belief that beauty and art could transcend politics and hatred. "But he's gone," Maya said quietly. "And my daughter is here, now, dying. Yes, he's gone. But I'm not, and neither are my children and grandchildren. That Kandinsky isn't just a painting to us, it's a connection to a grandfather my children never met, to a cultural heritage that was nearly destroyed." Maya felt the conversation slipping away from her, her careful neutrality dissolving into the emotional reality of what these stolen artworks represented to their original families. "Dr. Rosenberg, what if I told you that returning this painting might cost a child her life?" A long silence. When the older woman spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. "Miss Rodriguez, in my experience treating children with cancer, I learned that there are rarely simple choices between life and death. Usually there are multiple options, multiple sources of help, multiple paths forward. Have you exhausted all of them?" The question stung because Maya knew she hadn't. She'd focused so intently on the financial impossibility of Sofia's treatment that she hadn't fully explored alternatives. There were research programs, charitable foundations, fundraising possibilities she'd dismissed as too slow or too uncertain. "I don't have time for fundraising or waiting for grants," Maya said. "My daughter has maybe 6 months. 6 months is a long time in the medical world, long enough to find creative solutions." Dr. Rosenberg paused. "Miss Rodriguez, I don't want to tell you what to do with your life or your daughter's future, but I will tell you this. My father believed that art belongs to the world, not to the people who happen to possess it at any given moment. If you sell his Kandinsky to save your daughter, you're continuing the cycle that stole it from us in the first place." The call ended with Dr. Rosenberg giving Maya her contact information and asking to be kept informed about whatever decision she made. Maya sat in the empty mansion's kitchen, staring at her phone and feeling the weight of moral complexity pressing down on her shoulders. She made 3 more calls that morning, reaching descendants of other families whose art Herman had stolen from the Nazis. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: initial disbelief, then growing emotional engagement as Maya described paintings that had been missing for over 70 years. The grandson of the Weiss family, now a retired teacher in New York, broke down crying when Maya described the Max Liebermann landscape that had hung in his grandmother's dining room. The daughter of the Goldman family, living in Los Angeles, spoke of spending her childhood wondering what had happened to her father's collection. Each conversation made Maya's moral calculus more complex. These weren't abstract historical victims, they were real people with genuine, emotional connections to artwork that had been torn from their families during the darkest period of the 20th century. But none of these conversations changed the fundamental reality. Sofia needed treatment that Maya couldn't afford, and these paintings were worth enough money to save her daughter's life. That afternoon, Maya called Marcus Webb back. "I'd like to arrange a meeting," she told the art dealer. "I have several pieces that might interest your clients." "Excellent. I can be in Pennsylvania tomorrow if you'd like." "Where exactly are you located?" Maya gave him directions to Millbrook, then spent the rest of the day researching Webb's background and reputation. What she found was troubling but not surprising. A dealer who specialized in works with complex provenance, serving wealthy collectors who valued discretion over documentation. There were no criminal charges in his background, but there were certainly ethical questions about some of his previous transactions. Maya told herself that Webb's moral flexibility made him perfect for her situation. He wouldn't ask difficult questions about how she'd acquired Herman's collection, and he could connect her with buyers who would pay premium prices for works they might not be able to acquire through legitimate channels. That evening, while Sofia worked on another watercolor painting at the kitchen table, Maya returned to Herman's vault one final time before the art dealer's visit. She walked through the space slowly, studying each painting and trying to imagine it hanging in the home of a collector who would appreciate its artistic value without caring about its human cost. The Kandinsky abstract drew her attention repeatedly. In Dr. Rosenberg's description, it had hung in her father's study, a place where a physician had retreated each evening to appreciate beauty and contemplate the larger questions of human existence. Now it hung in a secret room, beautiful and hidden and stolen. Maya found herself thinking about Sofia's watercolors, the delicate pictures her daughter created during the long hours of treatment. Maya had framed several of them and hung them in their temporary bedroom, creating a small gallery of hope and resilience. Art, as therapy, as expression, as connection to something larger than illness and fear. What would Sofia think if she knew her mother was planning to sell stolen paintings to save her life? Would she understand the moral compromise, or would it diminish the gift of life Maya was trying to give her? Maya didn't have answers to these questions, and she was running out of time to find them. The next morning brought Marcus Webb to the Kellerman mansion in a black Mercedes sedan that looked out of place on the rural road. He emerged, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Every inch the successful art dealer. Maya met him at the front door. Conscious of the mansion's shabby condition and her own appearance, jeans and a flannel shirt, the uniform of someone for whom fashion was an unaffordable luxury. Mrs. Rodriguez. Marcus Webb, thank you for reaching out. His handshake was firm, professional, impersonal. Quite a remarkable property you have here. Victorian, I assume. 1892, Maya said, leading him through the front hallway. She'd spent the morning moving Sofia's medical equipment out of sight and trying to make the mansion's ground floor look less like a squatter's campsite. And you mentioned inherited paintings from the pre-war period. Maya nodded, stopping at the concealed panel in the servants' corridor. Before I show you anything, I need to understand how your business works. If I have pieces I want to sell discreetly, what's the process? Webb smiled, a practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. Discretion is the cornerstone of my practice, Mrs. Rodriguez. I serve collectors who value privacy above all else. Authentication, provenance, research, legal documentation, these things can be ... flexible, depending on the circumstances, and payment. For the right pieces, immediate. I have clients prepared to make significant purchases on short notice, assuming the works meet their standards. Maya felt a chill at Webb's casual dismissal of authentication and legal documentation. This was exactly the kind of dealer who would help her sell Herman's collection without asking difficult questions. It was also exactly the kind of person who enabled the continued circulation of stolen art. Maya activated the hidden door and led Webb into Herman's vault. His reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His practiced professional demeanor gave way to genuine excitement as he surveyed the climate-controlled collection. My God, he whispered, moving toward the nearest painting. This is extraordinary. A private collection of this caliber. Where did you say you acquired these? Inheritance, Maya said simply. The previous owner was very private about them. Webb nodded, already examining the Max Liebermann landscape with a jeweler's loupe. Liebermann, definitely authentic. Museum quality. He moved to the Kandinsky abstract. Bauhaus, period, exceptional condition. This would bring 8 figures at auction. I don't want auction exposure. I need private sales. Of course, for works of this significance, my clients would pay premium prices for exclusivity. Webb continued his circuit of the room, examining pieces with increasing excitement. Mrs. Rodriguez, what you have here represents one of the most significant private collections of German modernist art I've ever encountered. The total value, he paused, calculating. Conservative estimates would put this collection at $200 million, possibly more. Maya felt the number hit her like a physical blow. $200 million, enough to save Sofia, to secure their future, to transform their lives completely. How long would it take to arrange sales? She asked. For a collection of this caliber, I could have initial offers within 48 hours, completion of sales within a week, depending on your timeline. Webb was still examining the paintings, but Maya could see him calculating commissions and profits. May I ask, what's driving your timeline? This kind of collection usually requires more ... deliberate ... marketing. Maya thought of Sofia upstairs, working on homework while connected to an IV line. Personal circumstances. I need to raise money quickly for medical expenses. Webb nodded with practiced sympathy. I understand completely. Medical emergencies don't wait for optimal market conditions. He turned back to the paintings. I could start with 3 or 4 pieces, generate immediate capital while we arrange sales for the rest of the collection. How much immediate capital? The Kandinsky alone would bring 15 to 20 million from the right buyer. Add the Liebermann and the Dix portrait, and we're looking at 40 to 50 million within the week. $50 million. More than enough for Sofia's treatment, for the best medical care money could buy, for a future Maya had never dared imagine for her daughter. I need some time to think about this, Maya said. Webb pulled out a business card. Of course. But Mrs. Rodriguez, collections like this don't stay secret forever. Word gets out, questions get asked. If you want to maintain privacy and maximize value, timing is crucial. After Webb left, Maya sat in the vault surrounded by the stolen paintings and tried to process what had just happened. She'd crossed the line by showing the collection to an unscrupulous dealer. She'd moved from contemplating theft to actively planning it. But she'd also learned exactly how much money Sofia's life was worth in the art market. $15 to $20 million for a single painting. Maya called Dr. Patterson and scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss Sofia's treatment options. Then she called the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to get more details about their research program. Finally, she started researching charitable foundations that provided emergency assistance to families facing pediatric cancer. If Dr. Rosenberg was right, if there were other paths forward besides selling stolen art, Maya owed it to Sofia and to herself to explore them before making an irreversible moral compromise. That evening, while Sofia worked on a new watercolor painting, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and a legal pad, creating a comprehensive list of every possible source of funding for her daughter's treatment: medical research grants, charitable foundations, crowdfunding platforms, clinical trials, hospital financial assistance programs. She compiled contact information and application requirements for dozens of possibilities. The process took hours, and by the end Maya was forced to admit that Dr. Rosenberg had been right. There were multiple potential sources of help. Most would take time, many required lengthy application processes, and none guaranteed success. But they existed. Maya also researched the legal and ethical framework governing Nazi-looted art. The Washington Principles, established in 1998, created international guidelines for identifying and returning Holocaust-era cultural property to its rightful owners. The Holocaust Expropriated Art Recovery Act, passed by Congress in 2016, extended statutes of limitations for families seeking to recover stolen artworks. The legal case for returning Herman's collection to the original families was clear and supported by international law. The moral case was even stronger, but the practical case for saving Sofia's life was immediate and urgent. Maya looked across the kitchen table at her daughter, who was adding delicate details to a painting of flowers blooming in a garden. Sofia worked with intense concentration, lost in the creative process that seemed to transport her beyond the reality of illness and uncertainty. "What are you painting, Mia?" "It's our garden," Sofia said without looking up. "But how it will look when spring comes and we've planted flowers everywhere." Maya studied the painting, their dilapidated mansion surrounded by blooming gardens, the vision of hope and renewal that her 8-year-old daughter carried despite everything they'd been through. "It's beautiful," Maya said. "You see beauty everywhere, don't you?" Sofia looked up, her thin face serious. "Mama, beauty is always there. Sometimes it's just hiding, and you have to look harder to find it." That night, Maya made her decision. She would not sell the paintings to Marcus Webb or any other dealer who specialized in works with complex provenance. Instead, she would contact the Holocaust Memorial Museum and begin the process of returning Herman's collection to its rightful owners. But she would also wage a comprehensive campaign to fund Sofia's treatment through legitimate means. She would apply to every foundation, research program, and charitable organization that might provide assistance. She would launch crowdfunding campaigns, organize fundraising events, and appeal to the media to tell Sofia's story. Maya would choose justice over expedience, moral clarity over financial desperation. She would trust that finding other ways to save her daughter's life would be possible, even if they seemed impossible now. And if she failed, if the legitimate paths to funding Sofia's treatment proved insufficient, Maya would face that moral crisis when it came. But she wouldn't begin by choosing theft over integrity. Maya called Marcus Webb and told him she'd decided not to sell the paintings. His disappointment was palpable, but he urged her to contact him if she changed her mind. Then Maya called Dr. Sarah Goldstein at the Holocaust Memorial Museum and scheduled a meeting to discuss the authentication and restitution of Herman Kellerman's stolen collection. The choice was made. Now Maya had to find the courage to follow through on it, and the resources to save her daughter's life without compromising her soul. Act 4. The Transformation. Call to the Holocaust Memorial Museum set in motion a process that would transform not only her life, but the lives of families around the world who had spent decades wondering what had happened to their stolen heritage. Dr. Sarah Goldstein arrived in Millbrook 3 days later, accompanied by a team of art authentication experts and a documentary crew that specialized in restitution cases. Maya had spent those 3 days in a whirlwind of activity, launching Sofia's crowdfunding campaign, reaching out to local media, and applying to every medical assistance foundation she could identify. Maya met the museum team at the front door of the Kellerman mansion, conscious once again of the property's shabby condition and her own modest appearance. But Dr. Goldstein, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, put her immediately at ease. "Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for contacting us. What you've discovered could be one of the most significant art recoveries in recent history." Maya led the team through the house to Herman's hidden vault, watching their reactions as the climate-controlled room revealed its treasures. The authentication experts immediately began examining the paintings with specialized equipment, while the documentary crew set up cameras to record the historic moment. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Goldstein murmured, studying Herman's meticulous documentation. He not only preserved the works physically, but maintained complete provenance records. This level of documentation will make restitution much more straightforward. Over the following weeks, Maya's life became a careful balance between Sofia's medical needs and the complex process of returning stolen art to its rightful owners. The museum team verified the authenticity of all 23 paintings in Herman's collection, confirming that they were indeed works confiscated by the Nazi regime and presumed lost for over 70 years. Bot media coverage of the discovery brought international attention to Sofia's story as well. The narrative of a mother choosing moral integrity over financial desperation resonated with people around the world, and donations to Sofia's medical fund began pouring in through multiple channels. Dr. Rebecca Rosenberg-Chen flew to Millbrook the day her father's Kandinsky was authenticated. Maya watched through tears as the elderly physician stood before the abstract composition, reaching out to touch the frame with trembling fingers. "I haven't seen this since I was 12 years old," Dr. Rosenberg-Chen whispered. "I used to sit in my father's study doing homework while he worked at his desk. This painting was like a companion to me." Maya had prepared herself for this moment, but she was unprepared for the emotional weight of witnessing someone reconnect with a piece of their stolen childhood. "Dr. Rose, I want you to know, when I first found this painting, I considered selling it to pay for my daughter's medical treatment." The older woman turned to her with understanding in her eyes. "And what changed your mind?" "You did. When we spoke on the phone, he helped me understand that some things are more valuable than money. This painting doesn't belong to me, and selling stolen art, even to save my daughter's life, would have made me part of the same system that stole it from your family." Dr. Rosenberg-Chan studied Maya for a long moment. "Mrs. Rodriguez, may I meet your daughter?" Maya introduced Sofia to Dr. Rosenberg-Chan in the mansion's morning room, where Sofia had set up a small art studio next to her medical equipment. The 8-year-old girl, thin from chemotherapy but bright with curiosity, showed the elderly physician her latest watercolor paintings. "These are beautiful," Dr. Rosenberg-Chan said, genuinely admiring Sofia's delicate botanical studies. "You have real artistic talent. Mama says that art makes the world more beautiful." Sofia replied seriously. "Even when sad things happen, we can still make pretty pictures." Dr. Rosenberg-Chan glanced at Maya, then back at Sofia. "Your mother is very wise and very brave." That evening, after the museum team had finished their work for the day, Dr. Rosenberg-Chan asked to speak with Maya privately. "I've been thinking about our situation," she said, "about my father's painting and your daughter's medical needs." Maya tensed, unsure where the conversation was heading. "Mrs. Rodriguez, my father was a physician who dedicated his life to helping sick children. If he were alive today, I know he would want his legacy to continue that mission." Dr. Rosenberg-Chan paused. "I want to establish a medical foundation in his memory, using funds generated by the eventual sale of the recovered artworks. The Samuel Rosenberg Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research." Maya felt her breath catch. "Dr. Rosenberg-Chan, I don't understand." "The foundation's first grant will cover Sofia's CAR T-cell therapy and all related medical expenses. My father's Kandinsky will be donated to a museum, but not before it generates the funding needed to save your daughter's life." Maya sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. "I can't accept that. You've waited 70 years to get your father's painting back, and now I'm choosing to honor his memory by using it to help sick children, just as you would have wanted." Dr. Rosenberg-Chen's voice was firm. "Mrs. Rodriguez, You gave up a fortune to do the right thing. Let me do the same." The other families contacted through Herman's documentation made similar choices. The Weiss family descendants established a cultural preservation foundation. The Goldman family created an educational fund for young artists. Each family found ways to transform their recovered heritage into forces for positive change in the world. Maya watched in amazement as her decision to choose integrity over desperation created ripple effects she never could have anticipated. The media coverage brought additional support for Sofia's treatment, but more importantly, it inspired other families to come forward with information about art that had been looted during the Nazi era. 6 weeks after Maya first opened Herman's hidden vault, Sofia began her CAR-T cell therapy at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Maya sat beside her daughter's hospital bed, holding Sofia's hand as the modified immune cells flowed into her bloodstream through an IV line. "Mama, are the paintings going to help other kids too?" Sofia asked, her voice weak from the pre-treatment chemotherapy. "Yes, Mia. The people who owned them before are using them to help lots of children." "That's good. Art should make the world better." Maya squeezed her daughter's hand, marveling at the wisdom that illness and treatment had taught Sofia about life's true priorities. 3 months later, Sofia's latest test results showed what Dr. Patterson called remarkable improvement. The CAR-T therapy had achieved what they'd all hoped for. Sofia was in complete remission. Maya stood in the Kellerman Mansion's restored morning room, now Sofia's permanent art studio, watching her daughter work on a large canvas that showed the house surrounded by the spring garden they'd planted together. Sofia's hair was growing back, dark and curly, and her energy had returned to normal 8-year-old levels. The mansion itself had been transformed as well. Using funds raised through the crowdfunding campaign and donations that had poured in after the media coverage, Maya had been able to restore the essential systems and make the house truly livable. The Kellerman family's former home was now a warm, welcoming space where a mother and daughter could build the future they'd nearly lost. But the most significant transformation was in Maya herself, the woman who had once been willing to sell stolen art to save her daughter's life had become an advocate for art, restitution, and ethical collecting practices. She'd accepted a position with the Holocaust Memorial Museum's Art Recovery Project, helping other families locate and reclaim their stolen cultural heritage. "Mama, look," Sofia called from her easel. "I finished the painting of our house." Maya walked over to examine her daughter's latest work. Sofia had painted the Victorian mansion in bright, cheerful colors, surrounded by blooming gardens and bathed in golden sunlight. But she'd also added something new: small figures of people walking through the gardens, families visiting and enjoying the beauty together. "Who are all the people?" Maya asked. "They're the families who got their paintings back," Sofia explained matter-of-factly. "I thought they should visit our house sometimes, since that's where their art was hiding." Maya felt tears she hadn't expected. "That's a beautiful idea, Mia. Maybe we could have a party for them in the garden when all the flowers bloom." Maya hugged her daughter, marveling at Sofia's instinctive understanding of community and healing. "I think that's exactly what we should do." That summer, Maya organized the first annual Kellerman Estate Restitution Garden Party. Descendants of the families whose art had been recovered flew in from around the world, gathering in the restored Victorian mansion's gardens to celebrate not just the return of their stolen heritage, but the triumph of justice over expedience. Dr. Rebecca Rosenberg, now 83 and moving slowly but still sharp, sat in the garden shade watching Sofia demonstrate painting techniques to a group of children and grandchildren from the other families. "She's remarkable," Dr. Rosenberg-Chen told Maya, "not just as an artist, but as a person. You've raised someone who understands that beauty and goodness are more valuable than wealth." Maya watched her daughter, teaching art to children whose great-grandparents had lost precious paintings during humanity's darkest hour, now recovered and transformed into forces for healing and education. "I think Sofia understood that before I did," Maya replied. "She taught me that doing right doesn't always mean sacrificing everything. Sometimes it means discovering that there are more ways to solve problems than the ones we can see when we're desperate." As the sun set over the Kellerman Estate gardens, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She'd bought a crumbling mansion for $2,500 and discovered art worth $200 million. But more importantly, she'd discovered that her own integrity was worth more than any amount of money. and that choosing justice over expedience had ultimately saved not just Sofia's life, but Maya's soul. The 23 paintings from Herman's collection had found new homes in museums around the world, where they were displayed with full information about their history and the families who had originally owned them. But their true legacy lived on in the foundations, scholarships, and medical research programs funded by their recovery. Herman Kellerman, the coward who had spent 60 years paralyzed by his theft, had ultimately enabled an act of moral courage that transformed the lives of dozens of families. His hidden collection had become a testament to the power of choosing right over easy, justice over profit, community over isolation. Maya tucked Sofia into bed that night in the fully restored Victorian mansion that was truly theirs now, purchased not with stolen money but with honest work and community support. "Mama, do you think the people who used to own the paintings are happy now?" Sofia asked sleepily. Maya thought of Dr. Rosenberg-Schon's tears when she saw her father's condition, of the Weiss family's joy at recovering their grandmother's landscape, of all the families who had finally learned what had happened to treasures they thought were lost forever. "I think they're very happy, and I think their families who died would be proud that their art is helping sick children get better." "Good," Sofia murmured, already drifting towards sleep. "That's what art is supposed to do, make things better." Maya turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her healthy daughter sleeping peacefully in a house they'd saved through integrity rather than compromise. Outside, the Pennsylvania autumn was settling over the gardens they'd planted together. Preparing for winter and the promise of spring renewal, Maya had learned that the most valuable discoveries aren't always the ones that make you wealthy. Sometimes they're the ones that make you realize how rich you already are, and how much more valuable moral courage is than any treasure you could steal or sell. The Kellerman estate stood in the moonlight, no longer hiding secrets but celebrating the truth that art, like justice, belongs not to those who possess it, but to the community that cherishes and protects it for future generations. And in Sofia's studio, canvases waited for tomorrow's paintings, ready to add more beauty to a world that had learned, once again, that doing right creates more value than doing wrong ever could. Maya Rodriguez, desperate mother turned art recovery advocate, had discovered that the greatest treasure in Herman Kellerman's hidden vault wasn't any of the stolen paintings. It was the opportunity to choose justice over desperation, and in making that choice, to transform not just her own life, but the lives of families around the world who had waited 70 years to reclaim